One morning I realized I was optimizing how I brush my teeth. Not joking. I was standing in the bathroom thinking, am I doing this mindfully enough? Should I breathe slower? Is this aligned with the kind of person I'm becoming? It was 7:42 a.m. and my toothbrush had performance anxiety. That's when something felt ridiculous. And then it hit me. I wasn't living my life, I was supervising it. Because it wasn't just the toothbrush, it was everything. My mornings had a structure, my evenings had reflections, my reactions had analysis, my rest had intention, everything had a purpose. Even my walks weren't walks, they were nervous system regulation sessions. Even my journaling wasn't journaling, it was emotional optimization. And it all looked healthy, calm, intentional, disciplined, but underneath it, tension. Because every moment carried a silent upgrade request. Can this be better? Can I respond better? Can I think better? Can I heal faster? Self-improvement used to mean growth, but somewhere along the way it quietly turned into something else. Self-surveillance. If I felt irritated, I immediately tried to regulate it. If I felt unmotivated, I would push myself. If I felt bored, I tried to grow from it. Nothing was allowed to simply exist. Every emotion had to become material. Every mistake had to become insight. Every pause had to become progress. And slowly, something strange happened. I didn't know how to just be a person anymore. I only knew how to be a project. Not broken, not failing, just constantly under construction. Even good days felt like maintenance. And the strangest part, from the outside everything looked fine. Healthy habits, thoughtful decisions, awareness, growth. But inside there was a quiet tightness, like life was something to manage instead of something to move through. At some point I looked in the mirror and had a strange thought. Who exactly is running this whole improvement project? Who is this me that is constantly working on herself? So I looked a little closer by trying something very simple. I asked the question directly. Who am I actually? Not as philosophy, not as a spiritual exercise, just looking. And what I found was surprising. Thoughts appeared, memories, a voice commenting on the moment. But the me that was supposed to be running the whole improvement project was impossible to locate. There was no manager behind it all. There was nothing solid there. The one who is constantly working on herself turned out to be mostly a story, a narrative that keeps repeating, I should be calmer, I should be wiser, I should be better. And because that story repeats all day long, it starts to feel like a solid identity. But when you actually look for the one who is doing all this improving, there isn't much there, just thoughts about improvement. And this is where something unexpected began to open, because if the self that needs constant fixing is mostly a story in the mind, then the entire improvement project starts to wobble. Who exactly is upgrading whom? Strangely enough, this isn't a new discovery. Many ancient traditions circled around this insight, not always in the same language, but in the same direction. In Buddhism, there is the idea of anatta, the absence of a permanent self, not as a philosophical belief, but as something that can be directly observed. In many mystical traditions, there is a similar idea, sometimes described as dying before you die. Not physical death, but the quiet fading of the separate I that believes it is running the whole story. In Christian mysticism, this appears as the language of surrender. Not I, but Christ lives in me. In Sufism, the word fana is used, the dissolving of the separate self in the beloved. And in Advaita Vedanta, there is a simple but destabilizing question. Who are you really? When you look for the one who is seeking awakening, you do not find a stable entity. You find awareness and thoughts appearing within it. Different cultures, different metaphors, different centuries, but a similar movement. Not upward toward a better personality, but through the assumption that there is a separate self who needs to be perfected. And this is where something almost absurd becomes visible. The entire modern self-improvement culture is built on the same misunderstanding that these traditions were trying to dissolve. They were not teaching self-perfection, they were pointing beyond the self entirely. But somewhere along the way, that radical insight was translated into optimization. Spirituality became the most sophisticated form of brushing psychological teeth. More mindful brushing, more conscious flossing, better lighting in the inner bathroom. But the original message was quieter and far more unsettling. There may not be a separate self standing outside of life trying to improve it. There is just life happening. Breathing, thinking, walking, brushing teeth. And when that is seen even briefly, something relaxes. Because if there is no soul itself to perfect, then the pressure to constantly improve starts to loosen. Stopping the constant self-improvement didn't happen as a big decision. It happened more like a small experiment. What if this irritation doesn't need improvement? What if this lazy Sunday doesn't need optimization? What if brushing my teeth is just brushing my teeth? No lesson, no upgrade, no hidden meaning, just a human moment. And then something subtle began to change. Not enlightenment, not transformation, just a little more room. Room to react imperfectly, room to waste time, room to not turn every experience into personal development. Life didn't collapse, nothing got worse. If anything, it felt lighter, because attention was no longer split between living and supervising the one who lives. Maybe that's what stopping the constant self-improvement really is. Not rejecting growth, not abandoning learning, just stepping out of constant self-editing. Maybe you don't need to improve this moment. Maybe you just need to experience it. And strangely enough, when the pressure to become someone else relaxes, life starts moving again on its own. More simply, more honestly, more like life. If this resonates, subscribe. This channel is for people who are tired of turning their lives into improvement projects.